kind of in a way, uh, weird thought that that to imagine how for the last however old humanity is, 100,000 years. I don't think anyone really knows how old humanity is, but that whole entire span from the dawn of humanity up until 1938, nobody had ever had any idea that there are compartments in their brains in their own brains that they are completely unaware of. And until LSD came along, and there's places completely unknown by everyone before 1938 that something like LSD activates, and the other chemicals that have come out within the last, I think 50 years ago, between 50 years ago and now, there have been things that, like ecstasy, you couldn't explain ecstasy, and I'm talking about MDMA, the good ones that are like a third MDMA, a third ketamine, and a third methamphetamine. You couldn't explain that experience to a caveman that understands English, or the experience of dimethyltryptamine, which I think was figured out earlier, probably within the last between 100 and 200 years. And it makes me wonder how many other compartments are still in my brain that there are chemicals that still haven't been invented that can be consumed, that can be customizingly added to your, because that's really what makes a huge part of your attitude, your thought process, the chemistry, the chemicals. Your brain creates a lot of its own chemicals, when you have an orgasm, when you're eating food, when you get tired. There's all these things that you wouldn't really think twice about because they've always been there, but they're strange experiences. And there's probably a hell of a lot of uninvented chemicals and places in your mind that we today have no idea about, and that actually may never be accessed. Those places in your mind will never be discovered. There's probably a chemical that's twice as complex as LSD. That's the one that really, LSD is the tip of the, that's the one that really gets me thinking about that. It's had Albert Hoffman been assassinated, or had he ever made it, not made it into the position he was in, would LSD have never been invented? Because that was, it might be one of the most important things anyone has ever done, as far as coming up with one thing that bettered the psychology of the human race. I don't know where humanity would be if it had never been invented. But I know the psychology as a whole would be different if it never came along. And then there's other things probably still on the way that we don't know about now, that when they come along, those people are going to be like having this thought that I'm having now about the people that were just 10 years ago. We're like, wow, how could... And then the thing that really gets me is all the compartments in your brain that you'll never know anything about. They're there, but because I think the brain is a fantastically complex machine, in which now this is really weird to do. If you step back and you look at just instances, like let's take alcohol for instance, you think, okay, when I'm drunk, I'm this person. I'll have sex with an ugly male, with an ugly man. I'll shout at the top of my lungs about something very trivial. When I'm tripping acid, I'll sit there and I'll stare at a tree for an hour and think about the bark, how the tree moves, how the tree breathes, and then like the me on Adderall would never do that. It's like a different person. So it's like me on Adderall would get intensely into a game or draw a picture, or there's only a few things that I do on these different chemicals that I wouldn't do on the other ones. On ecstasy, like the time that I got naked and rolled around on the ground in a shower curtain for like half an hour. Like the other drugs I wouldn't do that. So it's like the chemical says a lot about the action of the individual. But when you step back and you look at all those things happening, and those are your memories. These aren't stories you heard. These are things you remember yourself doing on these different chemicals. It's like how many more, like when you smoke salvia divinorum, how it feels, you can't feel it feels like your feet disappear, and like you're rolling backwards. Even the first time I smoked a cigarette, that feeling, even though it didn't really induce much action, but there are a lot that do change your actions, change your thoughts, like almost immediately. So when you step back and you look at yourself from like a third perspective, you dissect your memory, going, yep, that was me, I remember doing that. I would only do that on that drug. It really makes me wonder how many compartments, how many different people are in my head, because those are completely different people. It's kind of like a parody of that movie Being John Malkovich, which is a really interesting idea. It's not really a very good movie, but it's a really good idea. Kind of like Groundhog Day. Like, that movie would have been really cool if they would have just gotten a better actor than Bill Murray. Like, he goes through like 10,000 years of like the same day, and then when the new day finally does come, he's just all nonchalant about it. Like, oh, there's a girl in my... Oh, yeah, like, a new day. I knew this would happen. It's like... I think the actor should have been in a screeching uproar, like crying and just their world torn apart by the new day in that movie. But the idea was cool. And I know I won't live long enough to to get to try everything. I'll never get to try everything that I know exists. Like, I think next on my list is ayahuasca. That that sounds like a a different perspective. So there's still some things on my list, but it's the things that will never be on my list that I'll never know anything about. Different places in my brain, and I believe there's a really high number in places that humanity will never know about, and places that people in this time period just will never know about. The same way that cavemen never knew about all the stuff that we have access to today. And that's pretty much my thought, the whole thing, with some bird walking, but